Thanks for listening in to Conversations with Alison J, The Journey to Here. Please remember to subscribe, hit the like button and share. I'm your host, Alison J. Today, I'm delighted to welcome our guest, Veronica Simpson. Veronica is the founder of Back in Control Consultancy. She is one of London's leading specialists in safeguarding and domestic violence training, an expert in domestic violence abuse, an independent domestic violence advocate educator, an educator, trainer, coach, mentor, motivator, entrepreneur, a leader with over a decade of experience working with faith groups, local authorities, and voluntary organizations to build their confidence. Veronica is a qualified Nuco safeguarding trainer and educator and holds an IRIS, Identification and Referral to improve safety, qualification and accreditation. At BICC, Back in Control Consultancy, they value the freedom to be yourself, to live a life free from abuse by another person. Your life should be enriched and full with the aids of hands that are willing to help you grow, achieve, and excel. Thank you so much for joining us, Veronica. Welcome.
Right. Good. Hello. It's just you're on mute. You're on mute. It's so funny that, that's the most overused word in 2020, that with, sentence that we say, you're on mute.
I'm going to give you a joke. As you said that, so on, what's the date? On Wednesday, we had a happy hour, a virtual happy hour at work, because we've been working from home since what, March?
Yes.
And they're saying, so what should the tagline for 2021 be? And one person says, it should be you're on mute.
Yeah.
You're on mute. Yeah, it's either you're on mute or please unmute yourselves.
Yes.
It's like it's going to be one of those two things. So just like, so you saying that, I'm like, yeah, I said to my mum, the words I've used the words more in the last 9 months than I've used in the whole 49 years of my life. You're on mute. Please unmute yourself. Let me share your screen. Let me share my screen.
Yes, exactly. We had the same conversation last night. And what was it? Face, space, and something else. Yeah. Our jargon's just completely changed because of this COVID thing.
I tell you, and it's, one of the things that I've been saying, something, because everybody's like, oh, when we go back to normal, I says, well, if you're all waiting to go back to normal, you've missed a trick. And seriously, because life will never go back to normal, because if you look at, there's so many things in life where things have happened where life has never gone back to normal. Prime example, 9/11. Travel has never gone back.
Yeah, that's true.
Because the TSA and the taking your shoes off, and you can't go through with liquids, you can't go through with electronics and all of those things.
Yeah.
It's just like there's certain things that haven't gone back to, and they never will.
No, you're absolutely right. You're absolutely right. And we're seeing that, all around us within our communities and the way that we're working and everything else. It's just so apparent that this is going to be the new norm, as opposed to reverting back to what we used to know. And I don't think so much it's a bad thing in some ways. I think once we come through it, we're creatures of habit, aren't we?
Yeah.
And in terms of that, this is change, and we're going to be a little bit resistant, a little bit apprehensive, a little bit fearful about that. But, we're resilient, and we will adjust eventually, and we'll see the good in it, because even in this season, it's also been, as much as it's been very tragic in terms of the deaths and things like that, but it's also been a season of opportunity and creativity, in order for us to kind of, look into ourselves and see what else there is there, because we've got so much more time on our hands.
Yeah.
So it's a mixed bag. Definitely a mixed bag.
It really is. You're very right, because one of the things I'm looking at, like you're saying, because one of the things I heard during every recession there has always emerged a new breed of entrepreneurs, of millionaires, and so on and so forth, because you have people that look at what is needed for that time. So for example, things like the I was saying, like was it the IPOs for things like Grubhub and Uber Eats and a lot of these food delivery places gone through the roof, because that's what people are relying on phones. And so the creativity that people are coming out with, and because of some people unfortunately having lost their jobs and turning to look at the resources within themselves, what can I do? And then starting, people coming out of this having started their own businesses.
Yeah, exactly. A friend of mine, she's written a book during this time. She came on because I also have a ministry called Arise Ministry.
Okay.
And she came on our platform. She was invited as a guest. And then I like to tune into people and see what their skill sets are and things like that, and what they have to share with other women. And based on that, we had her on the platform, and she's, I would say, a motivational speaker, a woman that can empower. And so one evening she came on and she delivered an empowerment motivational kind of presentation that was really, really good. And while she was talking, I was just like, this needs to be in a book. And as soon as she finished, I turned around and I said to her, there's a book inside of you. You need to give birth to this book. And she was, she didn't receive it very well. Me, no. One of her family members was on the call as well. And her family member said, yes, you can't give this away free. You've got to put it in a book. And she wrote the book.
Wow.
In such a quick space of time. I think she made up her mind and she just did her research. I gave her some contact details for different people that I know that are already authors. And then, she's done it. It's just such amazing. It's so amazing.
That is excellent. But it makes me wonder if it's because of this time or what you said that gave her the encouragement to do it. Because to be honest with you, people could have all the time in the world, but if they don't have it within themselves, a belief within themselves that they can, does that make sense?
100%. 100. Do you know what? Yeah, you're so spot on, because I say that to say that the women's ministry has been going for 7 years. 6 years, 8 years next year, around the corner. And there are women that we used to be called Women of Virtue, and we then changed to Women Arise, not Women Arise, Arise Ministry. And it is what you have to do what it says on the tin, so to speak. You need to arise. And there are people ladies within the ministry that have done just that. But then you've got other people that are just respectfully, they just seat warmers, should I say. Spectators is a better way of putting it. Spectators, they want to be fed, but they're not going to go out, kill and eat.
Right.
Does that make sense?
Yeah, absolutely.
There are other people, they will, right, I've seen it, I'm going to go, I'm hunting, I'm going to kill, I'm going to eat it, I'm going for it. And then you've got the others that just sit there. So you're right in what you say. It depends on your mindset. What's inside of you. If you really want to experiment and embrace life and evolve, then you're going to kind of reach out and be thinking, what's my gift, what's my talent, what's my passion? I'm going to go and do this. And that kind of feeds into BICC, really.
Oh, I'm glad, because what you were saying there, it's because it's one of those things where, and some people, I think they become that way of being a seat warmer because of life and circumstances, isn't it, as well, though? Because if you think about, they say to you, I remember, and she just passed away this week, Barbara Windsor.
Yes.
And I remember back in the days when I did watch EastEnders, and we are talking about probably at least a good 15 years ago. And one of the things, I think there's two things I remember her for. when she gave, which one was it? Phil, a smack round the face. And the other thing I remember her saying is, if 100 people tell you you're dead, lie down. And that expression never left me. And you can use it for good or for bad. If 100 people tell you you're brilliant, go for it. What are you going to do? That's going to give you the motivation and the encouragement you need to go for it. But on the other side, if you've got people that are always told, oh, you're never going to amount to nothing, you're stupid, you're this, you're that, you're the other, guess what? That person who once upon a time may have had the biggest, grandest dreams in the world, they may now become a seat warmer because they've been told that over and over again. And that's what they have ended up believing. And I've seen it from both aspects, from both ways. And it's been such a shame when you see someone and you feel there's something within you and that person's very introverted and quiet or withdrawn. And I'm the kind of person that I look at people and I always want to psychoanalyze everyone and everything. And I'm like, what happened? I'm always, because like anything that happens, like for example, when that whole Chris Brown and Rihanna incident happened, and everybody's like, oh my gosh, the thing that came into my head was, wow, that should never have happened. But what did you see? What happened to you for you to be that person at such a young age? Because if my memory serves me right, I think he was only in his very early 20s when that happened. And I just thought, what happens to a person that is what manifests in their life at such an early age? Even when you look at that horrible, do you remember a good few years ago, that horrible incident with the little boy, is it Jamie Bulger? And it was two other little boys that killed him. And it just makes me wonder, what happened? What did you see? What did you experience? And I think this leads nicely into what you do with BICC and Back in Control Consultancy in helping people so that doesn't become their reality. Please, Veronica, correct me if I'm wrong.
I think environment has a lot to do with who we are, who we become as adults. I think childhood, I think you're a psychologist. Are you have you studied psychology?
Yes.
So, okay, so in terms of that, of psychotherapy, because you said that you psychoanalyze everything. So I think in terms of that, it all goes back to our childhood and environment and what we're exposed to. For example, I just saw a really awful video just this week where a child, I would say that the child was no more than 7 years old, and him and his mum were sitting on a bus. And I didn't listen to the video. I watched the video. I did not need to hear the sounds of maybe her, screeching, because her 7-year-old son, literally held onto her nose and, really squeezing it. And then he didn't just hit her, he laid into her.
My God.
Left like a boxer, literally. 1, 2, 1, 2, 1, 2, 1, 2. He just kept laying into her. And I was thinking, my God, is she getting support? This young person at maybe 7 years old needs some intervention. He needs some help because he's obviously been exposed to that.
Yeah.
And, it hasn't been managed. And if it's not managed, there's going to be so much problems for mum and others. What did he see? Is that something that he saw at home?
Right.
Is it TV? Because, it's the monster in our house, isn't it? The TV. And young, impressionable
mind
will, they will believe what they see and act it out, what they've seen on the TV. But at the same time, regardless, when we get to a certain age, there's no excuse for domestic abuse. There is absolutely no excuse for domestic abuse, because when we get older, we can make our decisions about, you know, what's wrong. We know what's wrong. We know what's right. So we can make informed decisions based on that and decide that this isn't, you know, it isn't right to beat up on your loved one, to beat up on your mother, your father, your children onto their parents. It's a decision that you've decided, well, it's okay for me to continue doing that, because I'm sure if I am, you know, anybody in their right mind, into somebody that isn't an abusive person, is not gonna go and beat another person up,
right,
and abuse them in that way. So yeah,
that is very true, and I like how you put that. It is a decision that you make once you reach a certain age. That's pretty much it. It's a decision that you make, right? And so, Veronica, I would like to talk to you a bit about back in control consultancy. But what I also would like to know is what led you on that journey, on that path to start back in control consultancy. What is your story? What is your journey?
My journey is, I worked for Network Rail for 10 years. I have an older child, and he went through some challenges because we lost his dad. And whilst I was being supported with him, one day I remember coming downstairs and I was saying, I really want to give something back. You know, I've had so much support. I really want to give something back. And I said it last night, and by the next morning, I came downstairs and my phone was ringing. And I answered my phone, and a lady was on the other end, and she said to me, Veronica, we're looking for some, what were they called back then? They needed some workers within the Youth Justice Service, action plans. What did they call it? I've forgotten the name of it now, what the name of the role was. But what it consisted of is action. Oh, I can't even think of what the name is. But anyway, what the role in it consisted of, entailed, was to sit in a panel as a panel member, and where if a young person was getting themselves into trouble, they would decide whether the young person was going to go to court, or they were going to get this action plan.
Okay.
So if they were lucky enough to get the action plan, they would not have to go down the criminal justice route. So I started doing that as a volunteer, and I didn't stay for very long because I felt that the service that they were offering at the time didn't have enough adequate resources for these young people, and it meant that they needed to just report in as opposed to rehabilitate them and offer alternative things to do. So I didn't do that for very long, but within that I networked, and then I was offered a position as a parenting sessional worker, as a volunteer initially. From that, they then employed me, and I was delivering parenting programs to parents where their children were presenting challenging behaviour. And I did that for some time, really, really enjoyed it. I left Network Rail. So I was doing this, I was still working for Network Rail, and I was still volunteering. And then I said one day, do you know what? I just don't want to do Network Rail anymore. Because I was a project planner. I started as a team organizer, and then I progressed and became a project planner. I said, I don't want to do this anymore. I don't want to do it anyway. They were going for a reorg, and it just so happened that I was made redundant. But that was great for me. So I decided 6 months, I'm just going to take 6 months out, and I'm going to volunteer, continue to volunteer. During that time, when I was actually enjoying myself in terms of relaxing and recuperation, that another lady called me up and she said, Veronica, there's this job going and I've put your name forward. So I was like, oh, okay. Really wasn't interested in the role at all. And then the manager or the CEO from that organization got in contact with me, and she said, I've been given your details by blah, blah, and we'd like to offer you an interview. So they offered me the interview. They sent the interview by email. I didn't see the email. I had no interest whatsoever. Cut a long story short, they employed me. So they employed me, and they paid for my training. They paid for my qualification in domestic abuse. And the rest is kind of where I am now. So what happened during that time, I became really passionate about what I was doing, and had previously worked with parents, and now working with adults and those that had been affected by domestic abuse and domestic violence, men and women, both genders. And I became really, really passionate about what I was doing. But during the course of time, I realized that I was supporting Christian women. I was supporting Christian women. I was supporting pastors' wives. And I said, I'm also a Christian as well. And I remember reading the story about Moses when God commissioned him and said, you know, here's your rod. And that really resonated with me. And I was like, you've given me a rod, Lord. You know, this is a transformational and transferable rod that I can utilize, because everything that I believe, that everything that we have, that God has given it to us for a specific reason. So I prayed about it. What is it that you would want me to do with this? But I'd already made the connections.
Right.
And
you just wanted a confirmation.
I just wanted confirmation. And I got the confirmation, and BICC was birthed and registered in 2015. But prior to that, I started to, you know, beaver away in the background, pulling things together and sourcing information about the feasibility before the implementation of it. And yeah, we're implementing now. And yeah, BICC is offering the service to the faith communities, although we're inclusive, but that's my passion and that's my baby, to offer support to faith communities that are suffering from domestic abuse and domestic violence. And I'm sure you can understand why, because domestic abuse and domestic violence is a very taboo conversation.
Absolutely.
So there's definitely a need. There's definitely a need for the work that we do. And the evidence is in the referrals and the interest that faith leaders have within our organisation. So yeah.
And I'm glad that you mentioned that, because that is a question that I wanted to really ask you. And I don't want it to come across like I'm bashing the church, because I'm really not bashing the church. But what I wanted to ask you was, when you first started helping these women, and when you first started to offer the training to faith-based organizations to help bring about the awareness of domestic abuse and domestic violence, did you receive any resistance? Because of course, these things don't happen in the church. Come on.
Yeah, no, absolutely. And to be fair, I'm going to be completely honest with you. The church are the hardest faith community to engage. Most of my clients, most of my DV champions are from other faiths. The Black church, the Black minority church, are very resistant to having these conversations. But I say that to say that I know that BICC has been a bit of a trailblazer. And I'm not saying that to boast. I'm just saying we've been in people's faces and, you know, promoting BICC and making people more aware and breaking the taboo-ness, you know, around having these conversations. And people are people are championing domestic abuse and domestic violence now, which is great, and they're starting other things in you know, their own communities, which is absolutely amazing. So it's been a challenge. We do have, I have to say, we do have Black churches that are on board and Black DV champions, which are showing, it has shown an interest, but we've still got a long way to go. We've still got a long way to go. Yeah,
I can believe that, because I asked that question for a reason. Raised in one of the raised in a Black Pentecostal church. You
Yeah.
know, there's so many things that are taboo, but they're happening all around, every day, all day. And it's one of those things where it's just like, it's strange because it almost feels like, and not just in the church, you find this in, for example, in large organizations, corporations as well, don't you? Because it's so taboo, and because of the scandal and all the rest of it that, you know, that goes with it, it's a case of it feels, and again, please correct me if I'm wrong, that in some cases it's like they more want to protect the perpetrator than help the victim.
I think there's so many different facets to that, because I think that we first have to think about the abuser and the abused. Both are silenced. Neither of them talk about it. So based on that, I'm going to say that I think there's various reasons why it's taboo. And that's because the victim and the abuser, neither of them talk about it outside of the four walls.
Right. And do they talk about it in the four walls though?
Do they talk about it? Well, I'm sure there's going to be some dialogue, but what that looks like, we don't know. But also in that, I think that people are unaware.
Right.
They're not informed. I'm going to say, you know, they're quite ignorant to the dynamics of domestic abuse. Some people have an understanding, but they don't know the depths of and the dynamics of what domestic abuse. So how do you manage that? And also as well, within the church, within faith communities, we honor marriage. So just yesterday, I had a conversation with a Christian lady, and she, on several times, she went to her pastor and shared the information, or disclosed that she was being abused by her husband. And on every occasion, the pastor took his side, which you just said, and kept saying, you've got to stay in this marriage. You've got to stay in this marriage. You've got to stay.
And this isn't like 20, 30 years ago. You said you just had this conversation.
Yeah. You've got to stay. But at the same time, for the wife, for that Christian or, you know, Muslim lady, that person of faith, they want that. That's why they got married.
Yeah.
To honor the marriage. So hence the reason you can see the challenges that lie within that.
Absolutely. And it's so alarming and disturbing that you have, and let me put it another way, what I was about to say. You have a lot of these people in these positions of authority within the church, but it makes me wonder, how did they get there? What training did you have? Do you have any kind of background in knowing how to counsel people, and that makes me wonder, is that why over the years so many of these pastors, that the best advice that they could give is stay in your marriage? The Bible says that the wife must be, and I think, do you not think because of that, why you have nowadays a lot of women have a problem with when they hear you must submit to your husband, because that's what comes up in your mind. It's like, what, so I'm supposed to submit to him and just do anything he says, when really that's not what it means by submission. But over the years, you've had these pastors that have had no kind of training in how to counsel people in situations such as domestic abuse, domestic violence, that all they're told is stay in the marriage. So it's given the generations coming up a very warped view of what marriage really is and how to deal with things and who to go to. Especially if you look at, as you mentioned, in the Black church, what's the history of, let's take church out of it, but what's the history of Black people. You don't talk about your business. You don't get help.
Yeah, that's the situation that we're in. We don't have these conversations, and hence the reason that we offer training and awareness in domestic abuse and domestic violence, so that, you know, there'll be champions in, our aim is that there'll be champions in every church, in, you know, all faith leaders will be trained in domestic abuse and domestic violence, so that they will preach it, teach it, you know, from the youngest age.
You said
Sorry?
teach it, preach it, and I'm saying spot it as well.
Got it, absolutely. See the warning signs. Yes, so that's the reason why we do the training, because we know that there's definitely a need for people to become more aware, because, you know, in terms of faith leaders are trusted.
Yeah.
So, you know, they need to be equipped, because there will be people in their congregations that are suffering from domestic abuse and domestic violence. But, you know, if they start to preach it and teach it and spot it, they can have that dialogue, they can have that conversation. And equally, I champion that they should also have a safe space for a perpetrator as well.
Yeah.
Because there must be some kind of self-loathing, self-hate, you know, at some point after they've just been abusive to their partner. And where do they go to have that conversation?
And where do they go to get their healing so that they are no longer an abuser?
But they don't. They just move on from one relationship to another relationship.
And carry it with them like a bag.
Yeah, and carry it with them. Absolutely. Yeah.
Wow, that is something. And I'm glad that you mentioned that you're there as a resource for both men and women, because even though, yes, let's not diminish the fact that the majority of people that are the victims of domestic abuse and domestic violence are women, let's not forget that there are men out there,
yes,
that are also on the receiving end of abuse.
Absolutely. They
need to pay more attention to that as well, I think.
Yeah, they equally need support, and they need that safe space in order to have those conversations. It should be, you know, even when we think about premarital counselling, it should be encompassed in that as well, to ensure that they talk about it. You know, do you know what domestic abuse is, what it looks like? You know, healthy relationships. What does control look like?
Manipulation, of course, yeah, because
what does submission look like to you?
Exactly.
Both parties, what does it mean for you? What does being submissive mean to, you know, to each individual? I think there's so much work that can be done. Sorry, go ahead.
But I like how you put that, because for the most part, when we think about submissive, we just think that the woman, and especially if we look at from biblical terms, a woman must be submissive to her husband. However, I like how you said, what does submissiveness look like to both people? What does it mean? Because a man could look at it, that means, okay, you being submissive to me, that means you must be barefoot and pregnant and do everything I say, and what I say goes. But the thing is, that could be what it meant. That's how women could interpret it as well.
Yes, exactly.
Like, I'm never going to get married, and I'm not going to be, you know, no man's going to rule me, because that's how they also see it, when really that's, yeah, but no.
Yeah, exactly. And for me, you know, I didn't realize that I witnessed, or I didn't even know what domestic abuse was. So God would have it that I started in the role, and then I was then able to kind of reflect on what had happened when I was growing up, and I realized that I'd witnessed domestic abuse as a child. So it became more real for me as well. And yeah, I remember one day I was temping as a refuge key worker, and key working meant that I would do one-to-one consultations, key work with the victim survivor. And one day they were short of staff, and they had a lady coming into the refuge. So majority of the time, I'd be downstairs in the office. I didn't even know what upstairs looked like. And they said, Veronica, we need some help. We've got this lady coming in and we need to set up one of the rooms. We're short of staff. Sorry to ask you, but can you come and help set up one of the rooms? I still think about this day. And so I said, okay. I was a little bit apprehensive, but I said, okay. And we went upstairs and they opened, my colleague opened the door. And when she opened the door, I think the blood just drained from my body, because I saw the reality of domestic abuse and domestic violence. The man, the perpetrator continues with their life, while this woman, I'm going to say, because we tend to say female, because we know that, in terms of the ratio, women are more impacted and affected by domestic abuse in terms of the ratio 1 to 2 and 1 to 4 where men are concerned. So in terms of that, 1 in 4 and 1 in 6 men, 1 in 4 women and 1 in 6 men. So in terms of that, lost my train of thought. So yes, I went upstairs. I went upstairs, and the blood drained from the blood literally. I just stood there and I just froze, because I realised the impact that it has on a victim survivor when they have to flee their home. Room, when you think about your creature comforts, your home, we're blessed that we have 2 rooms, a living room, a front room, and bedrooms, but then you leave that to then be subjected to 1 room, a bed, a cot, a set of knife and forks, a plate. Honestly, I would love to, I don't know, I'd like to give you a picture of what it actually looks like. The bed, just a bed, some sheets, brand new sheets, brand new pillows, a bed, cutlery, a pan, nothing else in the room.
Wow. You've
left your home to that because somebody that was supposed to love you is a perpetrator of abuse and has abused you to the point you're so fearful that you have to escape and go into a refuge. The blood drained from my body, honestly, because I saw one side of it, which was having the, doing the consultations in an office environment, doing it that way. But then when I saw the reality for those that have to flee domestic abuse, it's never going to be acceptable. It's never going to be acceptable. And in terms of that, perpetrators of abuse need to be held accountable.
Absolutely.
Because when you think about it, the change when a victim survivor flees domestic abuse, there's so much change that happens for that individual, for the children, leaving their school, leaving their friends, leaving absolutely everything they know. And the perpetrator just continues with their life. Why is all the change and, why all the consequences? Why does it all fall on the victim survivor? And even when we hear about those that are arrested and that they go to court, there's no justice for what they've done. There's no justice.
Absolutely. And that is
excuse me.
That's such a harsh reality and it's making me wonder that it's almost like, that story, The Emperor's New Clothes, where everybody could see that the man was naked, but he was going around like, do you like my new clothes? And everyone's like, yeah, but you're naked, and laughing at him. And I say that to say that reminds me of the, and I use the term justice loosely, the justice system when it comes to domestic abuse and domestic violence. Because when you think about it, it's everybody else can see there's a problem, but those that the lawmakers are doing nothing to change it. So it's like, hold on a second. How can you be seeing all of these cases coming before you, and they're getting off, or they're getting a slap on the wrist, and nothing's being done to change it? No laws are being done to change it. And you're just looking at it like, how is this possible that you all don't see this, but everybody else does? So that's why I was making the reference to that story, The Emperor's New Clothes. Everybody else is seeing there's a problem, there's an issue, something needs to be done. Because as you said, there does need to be consequences for the behavior. Because, you know, if you think about it, back in the day, if I sold a bag of weed, I'd be going to jail. If I went and stole, I don't know, a chicken from the supermarket, you know, they'd be wrestling me to the ground and locking me up round the back. But when it comes to domestic abuse and domestic violence, it's almost like it takes for the poor victim to be killed in some cases before it's like, oh, well, yeah, she did call the police 25 times. She did run away from the house barefoot, and she 12 times. She was seen in the hospital 57 times. And then everybody's surprised that, oh wow, he killed her. It's like, hello, hi. Did you not see the signs leading up to that? Did you not see it leading to that?
Yeah, absolutely.
And you know, sometimes when you look at it, and even down to sometimes when you think about the police, when you look at some of these reports and they're like, oh yeah, the police went round there 27 times. It's like, so when was it going to become a thing that you took seriously then?
But I think in fairness, I hear what you're saying, and you're right. We want to see, you know, perpetrators of abuse being held accountable, but there's also a responsibility for the victim survivor as well to report, because sometimes they don't. And you know, it goes back to, you know, they went into this relationship not knowing that the relationship was going to be abusive, and they still love the perpetrator, they just don't like the abuse. And if abuse happened absolutely every single day from the day that you met them, you know, you'd get out really quickly. But it's subtle, the way that the abuse, the way that they, you know, they lure them into that false sense of security that you know, this is a healthy relationship. And once they're in that position where, you know, that individual, the victim survivor, has kind of made a commitment by, you know, marriage, building a home, having children, that's, you know, when they decide, when they know that they've actually won that person's love, I'm going to say, that's when the abuse starts. But it starts very subtly. And I always refer to domestic abuse as the bittersweet, because that's what it encompasses. You know, the perpetrator will be nice,
right,
they'll be abusive, and then be nice again. And for the victim, they always want to get back to, I'm so sorry, I love you, it's never going to happen again. When he's nice, he's really nice.
Yeah.
But and then there's the abuse, but it only lasts for a week. Then he's remorseful, and it goes on and on and on. So when it gets to the stage where police are involved, they have to support the charges. They have to give evidence. They have to make a statement, but they don't want that, because there's still that nice part of that individual that they like. He's still the father of my kids. He's such a great dad, but he's such a terrible husband. Do you know what I mean? So that's what it you know, that's the reality of domestic abuse for the victim.
And believe me, that part, I know all about that part, because I was in an abusive relationship. And as much as it wasn't physical violence and abuse, It wasn't until I came out of it that I realized, actually, that's abuse, the manipulation, the control. But in my mind, I knew there was a problem. I knew there was an issue. And it's funny that you should say that, because the way that it started, I kept saying, and thinking back on it now, was that me using that as an excuse to stay there? Because I was saying, but you know something, the way it started, that nice guy, that nice person, he's still in there, and I just want him to come back.
Yeah,
that's what I was saying.
Yes,
that's what I was saying. And because in my case, it was a case of eventually, one by one, my friends were no longer around because of how he manipulated situations and circumstances and things like that. So it ended up pretty much just he and I. Everything that was done, it was just he and I. And right. So it was really a case like that. And I remember I was doing that, thinking, well, because honestly, in the beginning, he wined me, he dined me, and it wasn't just about the material things, it's about how he was with me as well. And it was, if he had somewhere that he needed to go, I was the person that he would take with him. And he introduced me to some really great and amazing people. And also that when it was just the two of us at home, and the way that we interacted, the way that we got on, and the things we spoke about, the plans that we made. Then eventually I saw, and down the line, I saw the shift, I saw the change, and I knew that shift and change was happening. However, I think, like you said, the shift and the change was so subtle, because it wasn't just an immediate.
Yeah, absolutely.
It was so subtle that it was a case of, you kind of overlooked this one thing, and then you overlooked the other thing, then you overlooked that. And then when it became a lot of things I realized I had overlooked, it then turned to but that person that I first met, still there. He's still in there. I know he has to be in there.
And he loves me.
Yeah, I don't know about that part. No, I'm kidding.
Yeah.
But it was like, because no, and the reason that I say that, not to trying to be flippant about it, is I'm trying to think about it, and I don't recall him actually ever saying the words, I love you. It was more in my part thinking that, well, he must do, because he's here and he's with me all the time and we spend so much time together. And again, I was 21 when he and I met. It was like 2 months past my 21st birthday.
Right.
When he and I met. And was I 21? Yes, I was 21. And so it was a case of, I was still quite green, because I'd grown up in the church, and all the guys I dated before that were pretty much, well, anybody I was in a serious relationship before that were church guys. So I didn't know this whole new world, so to speak.
Yeah.
So it was a case of, so I can understand how they don't want to report it, because I didn't have children with him, and I was still hoping that good guy would come back out, much less those people that do have children together. And they're like you said, he's the father of my children, or she's the mother of my children, so to speak. So I don't want to do that. I don't want the kids to see that. I don't want. So honestly, Veronica, I fully do understand that part.
Yeah. I mean, I think is that because you're reflecting? And the reason that I asked you that, because I also ended up getting into an abusive relationship, but I did not recognize it as domestic abuse. It's only when I started working in the field that I actually had an understanding of what, but I didn't know. So many people are in abusive relationships and may deem it as being normal, when it really is quite abusive, and not until it gets to that point where you say, I can't do this, I'm going to leave. Do you leave?
Yeah, for me, it was, at first, I didn't recognize it. And I think, especially if we think back because I was 21, so we are talking about well over 25 years ago.
Yeah.
And at the time, I think in the early days, people only saw abuse as physical and sexual abuse. We didn't really pay much attention to emotional abuse, mental abuse, and things like that. So
Yes.
for me, it's actually started as emotional and mental abuse. It's not until a few years into it that it got physically abusive. So at that point is when I realized, and it's because, it wasn't physical abuse, it was sexual abuse. So it was a case of, and it was when I realized that he wanted to have sex and we're fighting, and I'm like, no, just because we're in a relationship, I'm still saying no. And I remember that this is in the days when every house had a landline, and I had the phone by the side of the bed. And I remember I picked up the phone. By the time I finished hitting him with the phone, that phone could not be used because it was smashed. And I remember I had a bruise in my hand, and it went from my thumb all the way across and up my little finger from how I was gripping the phone, and I was excuse me, I was hitting him with it. And it was then that I kind of realized, okay, this is abuse, but I still didn't pay attention to what led to that, the emotional and the mental abuse, until, as you say, me reflecting years later. And then when I came out of the relationship, and you know what it's like, you come out of a relationship and people are like, well, I wanted to tell you. And it's like, yeah, I'm not interested in what you wanted to tell me. And then it's like, yeah, but we didn't think you'd listen. And my thing is this: whether you think I would listen, yes or no, please tell me, because should anything happen, at least I can say, you know what, so-and-so did say, or so-and-so did try and warn me, or it's up to me whether or not I pay attention to what's being said. But those people that saw it should have said, Alison, come, be careful, because we're seeing certain things. Just want to make you aware. What you do with the information is what you do with the information. And so, yeah, in reflecting, I looked and I thought, actually, he was abusive. The control, the manipulation, and to use the term that you said, the isolation, because he isolated me from my friends. And some of these friends were friends that I had grown up with, but because he was suspicious of the relationship, because there was one really, really close friend in particular, and he's like, you sure nothing's ever happened with you and him? I'm like, he's like my brother. That's how we grew up, because they lived at number 12 and we lived at number 25. And we went to the same denomination church. How the lives intertwined, and my mum used to babysit them.
Right.
So it's like, no, we grew up together, like he's my brother, but are you sure? And because of how he was, I remember speaking to my friend and saying, listen, he's thinking this kind of way. And my friend, really good friend, was saying, look, I don't want to cause any problems in anybody's relationship, so I'm just going to step back and let you two just work it out and get on with it. And I thought to myself, that right there was the plan, though, wasn't it? For me to start to distance from these friendships and so on, just because it was causing an issue in my relationships. But now that I'm older and having reflected, if that was to happen again, unless that person was a person of real bad character or something, and I could see that person would lead me down a path that I shouldn't be going down, I'm not going to get into a relationship and distance myself from friends that I've grown up with and known pretty much most of my life, because the person that I'm with is suspicious that something may or may not have happened between them and I years ago.
But do you think that's because you've got an awareness now?
Absolutely.
Because you've got an awareness.
Absolutely.
That's part of it, isn't it? It's the fact that if you don't have an awareness, then you can be led down the wrong path, thinking that what you have got, it really isn't what you want, is not what you're getting. How it's going to map out, because they know who they are. You've got no awareness of who this person is.
Yeah.
because you're first starting to date them, and then you say, okay, you know, we can take it to the next level, you know, and become, you know, an item. And then based on that, later on, you find yourself in a situation where you are isolated because you've made that decision for yourself as well. This person wants you to be, you know, they want to be your world. And equally, you conform to that. You say, okay, well, you know, it's all about you. And then the abuse starts, and the people that you left behind no longer want to be part of, you know, your friendship group, because you've left. You know, we were really good friends. You were my best friend, and now you've left me because you're in this relationship. And but it is part of the strategy for the perpetrator to then isolate that individual so that they become more dependent, so that they can have power and control over that individual. So
yeah, and it's interesting that we're talking about this, because what's just come to mind is, if you think about now during these times of COVID-19 and the lockdown and things like that happening, those people that are on the receiving end of abuse, and the person that they're with is that person that isolates them, this is like the most opportune time for that, isn't it? Because we are isolated and socially distant and things like that. So is BICC doing anything during this time to help people? Because I'm sure it must be heightened now, because I have read that since COVID-19 and the lockdowns have been put in place around the world, that domestic abuse and domestic violence has actually increased.
Yeah, absolutely. Our work has increased. And during the time when we were not able to go out, it was very difficult for us, because we had people our clients that were referred into the service that we couldn't make contact with because they're living with their perpetrators. And that was such a, you know, where you know that there's a feature of domestic abuse and that they're living together, and now that, you know, they're not going to be able to have any freedom, any space from this individual 24/7, apart from the hour that you're allowed to go out. That, you know, there was huge concerns for those that are being affected by domestic abuse. And, you know, we have to think about strategies in order to be able to reach out to them, by using code words and things like that. When you go out for your walk for the hour, give us a call then if you're alone. And the increase in terms of referrals, or people just reaching out on the website, looking at information and things like that. It's been a very, very challenging time for us and for other specialized agencies, trying to give them the support that they really, really need. And for some people, unfortunately, it was the very first time that they actually saw the abuse because of the lockdown.
When you say some people, the first time they saw it, who are those some people?
Experienced it because of the lockdown. It's the very first time that they're actually experiencing the abuse. Because when you think about some of the challenges that we've had to experience, homeschooling, redundancy, loss of job, because of that, people are using substances to cope and things like that. Being locked in with someone that you're used to seeing just for a couple of hours before bedtime.
Yeah, true.
All of a sudden, they're at home, you know, and it's caused, I'm laughing about it, but I'm laughing about it not because of the abuse, but I'm just saying, you know, sometimes people do not spend a vast amount of time with their other half, because, you know, they're out at work and they've got their lives, but all of a sudden, you know, one thing after another, it's the homeschooling, it's the redundancy, it's so many factors, and then that's become abusive. Some people will go outside and if they haven't got that intention, and they're not that way inclined, they would find strategies in order to deal with that and for it not to become abusive. But for other people, it's become an abusive relationship.
Yeah, I can see that, because just looking at your website and some of the stats that I saw, it was saying that 2.4 million adults experience domestic violence in the UK every year.
Every year, yes. Yeah.
And I'm sure with what you're saying now, and with COVID, the sad part about that number is probably going to go in the wrong direction.
Oh, absolutely. Can you imagine when the statistics come out for 2020, 19, 20, for the year 2019 and 2020, and those statistics, it's going to double, I'm sure. I'm sure it's going to double. So, as a result of the COVID lockdown, yes.
Gosh, that's shocking. So what does that mean for your organisation, though, and how you reach out and how you do your training? Because I know that you've got safeguarding awareness and training, you've got domestic violence awareness and training, domestic abuse survivors workshop. With COVID and with the lockdown, how do you now conduct that and do that so that you and your organization can actually help a lot more people?
Well, we do a lot of
survivors.
So we do a lot of advertising. We work in partnership with other organisations, faith leaders. We offer the training, and we're having to do. We've got a helpline as well, and we're having to use Zoom a lot more.
Okay.
So where there's a will, there's a way. As long as you're passionate about it. We're fortunate that we've received funding in order during this time, during COVID, during the lockdown.
Right.
We've received funding in order for us to be able to expand and to tailor our services to meet the needs of those that are suffering due to COVID. For us, we've had an increase in referrals. We've had an increase in terms of interest in the awareness training, which is it's great in terms of business, but it really shows you exactly where we are in terms of a 50% increase in the workload and what we do. So we've expanded on staff and things like that. So there's definitely a need at this time for the service that we offer.
Yeah, honestly, and if ever it's needed, is now, right? Because domestic abuse, domestic violence has always been there. Let's be honest. And unless there's organisations such as yours that provides the trainings and awareness, the numbers will continually go in the wrong direction. Because if you think about the things that contribute to people becoming perpetrators of this, the pressures of life, they're not getting, even though we've got things that make our life easier, like the internet, computer, and all the rest of it, life has actually become more stressful. So what does your training cover that will actually help spot those people that are, because it's interesting. Let me ask this before I ask that question. Does your training cover not just being able to spot somebody that is experiencing domestic abuse, but does it cover spotting and being able to see, I don't know if that's the right word I'm using, but does it cover being able to be aware and spot the signs if somebody is actually the abuser?
Right. So so I'm going to respond with my first initial thought, and that is, what does a perpetrator of abuse look like? What does a perpetrator of abuse look like? How can you identify a perpetrator of abuse? How can you identify a victim of abuse? They're not identifiable. Unless you see somebody, that has lacerations or, black eyes and things like that, you're not going to immediately think that they're suffering from domestic abuse. It's got to be something visual that you see. So I say that to say that one of the common characteristics for a perpetrator of abuse is that they're very charming, usually quite bright, intelligent, and the way that they project themselves outside of the home is completely different than how they are at home. Hence the reason we call them perpetrators of abuse, because some people say, oh, you know, he's just angry, he's got anger management problems, he went through this or she went through that, as the abuser being both women and men, both genders. But we will then say, if I'm angry, I'm going to be angry with everyone. I'm not going to just wait until I get home, shut the door, and then start beating you up. I'm going to be angry with my boss if my boss talks to me the wrong way, or somebody on the bus pushes again, or I'm going to be in road rage all the time. That is the difference. So there's no excuse in terms of, you know, how it's unjustifiable. You know, did I answer your question? I think I might have went on
No, that is good. And I like how you put that, because it's true. Because I know, like for me, I'm not just going to be angry at home and be fine outside. No, if I'm in a bad mood, and I know this is not good, but everybody knows it.
Yeah.
And there is like, because I suppose for me, when I'm in a bad mood, I actually tend to go really quiet. And most people that know me know that I'm not quiet. So it's a case of, okay, she's really quiet. Okay, what's up? What's up? And and it's not just going to be a case of when I'm at home, like you said, it's going to be outside. The road rage is going to, because honestly, road rage and me, I just pray for me with that. Okay. But the road rage is literally going to go, you know, it goes to the 10, it's going to go past that because it's not just something that I just reserve and just for when I'm at home. So that's a really good point that you made. But I think the reason that I was asking that question is like asking, can you spot it? Is like, you know, sometimes, for example, you might see a man or you might see a woman, and they might be, for example, you're alone with them and they're all happy, laughing and bubbly, and then their partner comes in and all of a sudden they clam up and withdraw.
Yeah,
you know? So I was more asking from those kinds of things where a person, you ask them a question and it's always, oh, you know, I just have to check with so and so, and in speaking about it, they start to sound nervous or they clam up. It was more from those kinds of, so even though you may not see like the physical, like a black eye or something, there might be some other characteristic traits that you might be able to pick up on. It was more that kind of thing that I was looking at.
Yeah, and it is part of the training. That's what you were asking me as well. You were saying, you know, is it part of the training? And definitely it is part of the training. But what you're describing is where, let's just say the couple are together and, you know, the victim survivor's always looking down or being a bit hypervigilant when they're around them. You know, you can kind of we can read people's body language, and that is telltale signs in itself. And, you know, if this person, before they were in this relationship, before they got married, they were happy-go-lucky and, you know, they were always quite sociable, and all of a sudden they struggled and they're no longer sociable, they no longer, they make plans to go out that they never actually meet up and things like that. So the control of movement, and like you said, when somebody becomes isolated as well, somebody that used to, you know, be quite sociable, and all of a sudden you don't see them anymore. So yes, we within the training, we do give pointers in terms of how can you spot domestic abuse and if somebody's suffering from domestic abuse and domestic violence. But equally, sometimes even for the perpetrator, the language that they use might be a clear indicator that they potentially could be abusive towards their partner, because they no longer speak about them in a respectful way, you know, or they might be speaking about them, they might be speaking to them. The way that they communicate even with their children might be and give you an indication that there's something wrong. But talking about children, because I've mentioned children, I hope you don't mind. And I think something that you know, that I try to provoke thought around is children's behaviours, because we tend to always look at the behaviour, but we don't look at why is that behavior happening. And we really do need to start looking, not focus on the behavior so much, but start to think about what could potentially be going on for that child at home. Because we know that where there's domestic abuse and and there's children, the children are going to be affected by it. So what's the demonstration of that? How is that expressed for the child? But, not to focus on the behavior, but try to think about what could be going on for that child. And anybody that's has that kind of suspicion about a friend, especially when it comes to relationships, because it's intimate, it's a personal thing. We don't want to become that nosy person. We don't want to intervene. We tend to kind of step back. But I think where there's suspicion around the relationship in itself, that's definitely a time to step forward, not to be intrusive, but to ensure that you're a friend, you're a link, you're there, that if they did want to disclose, that they think, okay, I can go to Alison and I can ask Alison, talk to Alison about what I'm going through, because we've already said that sometimes they don't understand that it's abuse, but just having that safe person, that person of trust that they can go and talk to is really, really important. So I say that to say that, we shouldn't step back when we have those suspicions. We should actually step forward and become friends.
And I would agree with you there, because I remember when I was, again, this was just before I was 22. Yes, I was still 21 at the time. And I was about to move, but it wasn't ready. So I had to go and stay with a family member for a while because the lease on one place ended and the other place wasn't ready for me to move into. So I stayed with a family member for a while, only to find out he was beating his wife. I was 21. I knew nothing about domestic abuse and domestic violence. But all I knew is that I don't care that you're related to me. This isn't right. So I remember that I called 2 other family members that lived up in Birmingham, because I'm originally from London. And so they lived up in Birmingham, and they happened to be the eldest 2 family members, my eldest aunt and my eldest uncle. And I remember I called them up and I'm like, listen, this is what's going on. You will need to do something. Because it wasn't even like I need to do something, because I'm thinking, I'm 21. I have no clue what's going on here. But I said, you need to do something. And bless them. I remember they came down from Birmingham. And they spoke to this family member. And it didn't really help, excuse me, because he continued, but she did leave. And I remember it was one of those things where even though she left and he was my family member, I made sure she was all right. And I made sure her and those children were all right. And I remember just driving from northwest London to East London regularly, just to make sure that she was all right, the children were all right, they had food and they had what they needed. Because in my view, I don't care that you're related to me. I don't care who you are. If I see something that's not right, I am going to do something. So as you said, that you shouldn't ignore it. A lot of the times it's like, I don't know what that something's going to be, because I had no clue what to do then. I honestly didn't. All I knew is just like, listen, your brother and sister have to come deal with you, because I don't know what to do.
And you know what you've just said is, I've got alarm bells going off, thinking, oh my God, we can't send out the wrong message here. And I'd like to invite you to the training, by the way. We're doing it on Zoom. Please do. I'm inviting you along. But one of the things that you said is that how you'd respond. And absolutely right. If you know somebody, one of your family members, a close friend is going through domestic, and you know the partner, you're going to think, I'm going to go and tell that, what are you doing? But that's not something that we would advocate that you do, because after you've said your piece, he's left in that relationship. Well, what did you say? What did you tell her? Why did you come and approach me like that? This is all your fault.
Yeah, I suppose for me it's because I saw it. Because I saw it, and there was an incident that happened early one morning that I actually had to intervene.
Yes, okay,
and I was like, oh no. I'm not getting, because anybody that knows me knows I'm not a morning person. So the fact I had to get up out of my bed to come and deal with this, And I'm just like, and everybody in my family knows I'm that one that will get up in your face.
Yeah.
Honestly, everybody, and like, again, pray for me because I just need help with that, because I know I shouldn't really be like that all the time. But I am that person that will get up in your face, literally up in your face, like, what are you doing? What are you doing? And because I saw it.
Yes, of course.
And I was there, and like I said, I remember having to stand in between them.
Wow.
Yeah, and I pushed him into one room, shut the door, and I had my hand on the handle behind me, faced her, and I said, just take the kids to school now.
Yes, get her out, usher her out of the house.
And I could deal with him while she was out of the house. So yes, I'm not, like you said, I'm not telling anybody, if you've got a suspicion or whatever, get involved, but it's literally because I was standing in the middle of these two people. And that's why I'm like, no. I don't know, because me and him's not going to fight, because we're just not going to fight, because, you know, he's a family big guy and I'm only little, like with my little 5'7", and at the time I probably weighed
5'1".
You know, at the time I probably only weighed about what? Because I've always been very slim. I probably only weighed about 7.5 stone at the time with my 5'7" self.
Wow.
But exactly. So, you know, I wasn't going to fight him.
Yeah, of course.
But I was going to do what I knew I could do, and that was just get the family involved to say, listen, you all have to help with this.
Yes.
Because this can't continue, because I don't want to see again and deal with again what I had to see and deal with this morning.
Did she leave? Did he leave?
She did eventually leave him, yeah.
That's brilliant. I mean, you know, where there's domestic abuse, we can't tell people you need to go. They need to make that decision for themselves. You know, we'll work with them whether they decide to stay or they decide to leave the relationship. But I remember for me, because I did say that, you know, I was in an abusive relationship, but it was for a very short period of time, because I remember the incident quite well, where I was on my phone. I was on the phone and I was being accused of, you know, who are you talking to on your phone? That was trying to get control over me at the time. However, one day, for no apparent reason, but, you know, he was very upset, nothing to do with me per se, but there was an exchange of words. And I kind of walked away like this. And when I turned around, all I saw was these legs like this, trying to fly. I call it a fly kick.
Yeah. And
I remember, I'm going to say I did a matrix, you know, with matrix.
The leaning back kind of.
And that was it for me. I was out. That was it. That was end of, you know, absolutely, this is not for me. I'm 5'1" and I'm not built. I'm built now, but I wasn't then. And it was like, you know what, this just isn't for me. And I escaped it. And you know,
yeah, you got out early because this
I got out early because it was the physicality of it. And I, you know, you show me a needle. I'm not built. I wasn't, you know. My pain threshold, I just don't have a pain threshold at all. So if you're going to come and approach me in that way to harm me, to cause me pain, I'm going like this. But I do sympathize for those that are in abusive relationships per se, because, you know, it's the challenges around that, as you've expressed and what you saw. Domestic abuse is horrible. It's awful. It is. You know, no one should be suffering from domestic abuse and domestic violence. And you started the conversation by talking about, you know, how does somebody become like that? Somebody that becomes abusive, how do they become like that? You know, and is there enough support? Is there enough resources? Do we talk about it enough? Do we offer the perpetrators of abuse? Do we allow, you know, what are we doing? What are we doing to help the perpetrator and the abuse and the victim? Sorry.
Isn't that the huge question though, Veronica? What are we doing to help the perpetrator? Because I firmly believe that if we helped more perpetrators, there wouldn't be just in the UK alone. And when you think about how small the UK is, I didn't realize how small the UK is until I moved to the US. Like you could fit all of the UK just in the state of Florida alone and still have room.
Yes, wow.
So, right? So if you
Yeah.
think about just how, because you could be driving for 12 hours and still be in Florida. Right. So that's okay. So I didn't realize just how small the UK was, but to have that number of 2.4 million a year.
A year.
And that's just in the UK. So if you put that like the rest of the world and bring all those numbers together, that's going to be a staggering number. So to your point, if we help and if there's resources for the perpetrators, I don't think those numbers would look the way they would look.
Oh, absolutely. So why is the focus always on the victim?
Because that's the easy way, though, isn't it? Isn't that the easy route?
No, it isn't. Because when you think about how much it's going to cost for a refuge space, how is it more cost effective?
Not even the cost, though. I'm not even talking about the cost. Because isn't it just easier to pick up and try and fix this poor damsel in distress, so to speak, than to deal with the real problem? That's why I say the easy route, because the victim's not really, in most cases, the problem.
No, at all. They're not there. They're not to blame. It's never their fault. It's definitely the perpetrator's responsibility, and onus should be on the perpetrator as opposed to the victim. But that's where things need to change moving forward. Mm-hmm. They really need to be addressed moving forward. But we need to have more conversations about domestic abuse, but men, which is really, really great. What I've noticed during the lockdown, that men are reaching out to men now. Yeah. There's platforms where men are having real conversations. We've had a couple of events. The first one was during the lockdown was with faith leaders from the Black majority churches, where it's faith leaders, and I was the host and asked a lot of questions around it. And then after that, or when it was coming to an end, people were requesting we need to have this conversation with men, and we did that. And that was really good. But since then, we've noticed that more people are having conversations with men and talking, encouraging men to have these conversations. So I say that to say, I think, in a way, that BICC has been a bit of a trailblazer, I have to say. That we've kind of, absolutely. We have been, because we've noticed that we're doing things and other people are following suit and doing similar things, which is absolutely great, because there's enough work for everybody. There's enough work. There's, I've got my vineyard, you can have your vineyard. But, if we're all doing this as a collective, then, eventually there's going to be some change. And we need to start talking to our sons. We need to start talking to our daughters about unhealthy relationships and what that looks like. Because even the language that the young people use today, and they see it as acceptable, the way that they converse with each other, I'm old school in that sense, and we need to tell, well, I've got a daughter, I've got a son, and, I'm always saying to my daughter, who's 17, I'm always talking to her. I'm always telling her, you're a queen. I'm always speaking into her life about my expectations of her and who she is and what respect looks like and what disrespect looks like. And the dialogue in terms of conversations, how you want somebody to speak to you respectfully and equally for you to speak to them. So I think that, in order for things to change, it might not happen for our generation, but if we do the work that's needed now, then maybe eventually, we will see.
Each of generation.
Absolutely. So we just got to keep talking about domestic abuse, to keep, keep talking about it, keep spreading the awareness wherever we are, and especially for me in faith communities, because they also need the support that they're not getting.
Absolutely. And I'm glad that you keep talking about it, and you've said that several times, because I don't know if you noticed on my email signature block and on my website, the tagline is, the more we have these conversations, the more these conversations can be had.
Absolutely. And I love that. Absolutely. Yes.
And I that came to me literally just not that long ago, because I was talking to somebody and we were talking about an issue. We were talking about, I think we were talking about infertility, and that's where it came from. Like, the more we have these conversations, the more these conversations can be had, because people will be more familiar with seeing some of the seeing these forums that they can join, and hopefully some people that are perpetrators of domestic abuse and domestic violence will also see these forums and start to take an inner look and seek the help that they need.
Yeah, absolutely. And you know what you just said is just so valuable in terms of how we move forward, because we you know, as women, we will talk. We might not go into too much detail, but we will talk. Men tend not to talk so much, especially when it comes to affairs of the heart and emotions. And whatever may have happened to them along life's journey that has made them become perpetrators, it's not the be all and end all of their life. They don't have to remain perpetrators. Unless there's a resource, unless there's a platform, unless it's a safe space, unless, again, conversations are being held where we are saying, do you know what? If you're upset with your partner, how do you express that? This is the wrong way of doing it. However, maybe you could try doing it that way, because let's face it, it's normal to have an argument in relationships. It's absolutely normal. But if we just approached it in that way, looking at the challenges that we encounter within relationships, and then looking at what we can do to change the behavior, the way that we react. Because if I have a screwdriver and you have a hammer, and I've never used a hammer, unless you say to me, Veronica, here's a hammer, I'm always going to be using the screwdriver.
And here's a hammer, and this is how you use it.
Yeah, exactly. We need to be educated. You know, we need new tools. Sometimes, you know, men need new tools. Women need new tools. Who's gonna, instead of us blaming, let's educate.
Let's
educate.
Like that. And that's where your training comes in. And your training, it covers what it's provided to faith leaders, as you said. And it gives an insight into abusive behaviors and attitudes and how to spot warning signs. Providing an understanding of the impact of abuse, the abuser, and on the children who witnessed it, as you have already said, and just giving pointers on how to offer support. And I really, really respect and admire you for actually starting this consultancy and being able to offer this much needed and valuable training.
Thank you. Thank you. And I'm so happy that you called me on. I think I have to, you know, I've never done a podcast before. I don't know when I'm going to look back at it and be like, I'm never doing that again. Or I need to tweak this, or I need to tweak that. But you know what? It's 2020 and we've been through, you know, challenging times. But, you know, we've already said that within that there's been opportunities. That I just want to thank you, Alison Jane, for allowing me to be on your platform. I really like your persona. I really like your persona. As soon as I came on, I felt like I've known you for some time. You've got a great persona for what you do in terms of. Thank you so much. I really want to thank you so much, because it's the first time that I've done a podcast. I've been asked to do different interviews, but I've never done a podcast. So I'm really appreciative that I came on this podcast and I did my very first podcast interview. So thank you very much for reaching out to me. It's such an honor.
Oh, you're welcome, and thank you. I would never have known this is your first podcast. And the truth of the matter is, I've always wanted every podcast I do to be like we're just having a conversation that is filled with information on important topics. So that's really how I've always just wanted the flow of these podcasts to be. So thank you so much. I appreciate you. And Veronica, just before you go, I just want to ask you, so that our listeners can know as well, where can people find you? Well, what's next for you, firstly, and where can people find you and find the training and the resources that you offer?
Okay, so what's next for us? We just continue. The work doesn't stop. It's an everyday, we could work 7 days a week, I'm sure, but obviously we don't. We tend to work 5 days, sometimes 6 days a week. So you can find us on www.backincontrolconsultancy.com.
Excellent.
Yeah. And we've got a helpline number, which is 0203 150 0171. So you can reach out. No inquiry is too big, too small. Just give us a call, and we'll be here to help. We're here to help, support, and spread the awareness. And anybody that's watching this, please spread the awareness of domestic abuse. Have the conversations. Get trained. Read about it so that you can have conversations, especially with your children, especially with your young men as well. Have that conversation around domestic abuse and domestic violence so that we can change things in the future, if not now.
Excellent. Veronica, thank you so much for joining us here on Conversations with Alison J, The Journey to Here. It has been such a pleasure speaking with you.
Likewise.
Thank you so much, my dear.
I'll be in touch with you offline at some point, most definitely. But thank you so much. Bless you. God bless you.
You're welcome. Thank you. And to you. Thank you so much. All right, take care.
Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.
Bye-bye. Bye-bye.